I wanna start off with the power of ideas. Like if you think about it, Bitcoin is an idea. Satoshi, whoever he, her, or them are, started this idea, and I think that idea is going to change the world. Right? We all know about Bitcoin. We all believe in it. At some point, like it's almost like a revolution, and it got started. But I think one thing that we sort of like miss is that it's not going to happen by itself, right? It's not that Bitcoin is some magical thing that once someone has the idea and had the initial code base, stuff would just automatically happen. It's not destined to become what it can become. It's an open source project. It's a bunch of code. It's a bunch of community people. It's a revolution, and it needs to be carried forward, right? So I feel like after the idea of Bitcoin, the most important idea that there is how to grow Bitcoin. Because his job is not done. If anything, Satoshi sort of like started the work, and the bulk of the work is actually depends on other people like us, who need to figure out how are we going to grow Bitcoin? How do we take Bitcoin to 1 billion people? How do we make sure that Bitcoin actually becomes what it's destined to become, right? So I think that's sort of like the core idea that I've been fascinated with, I've been working on, and today I'm gonna like share some of the landscape, some of the ups and downs, some of the future look into how all of this might play out. And in doing that, I'm gonna sort of like tell a story of my 3 disagreements with Vitalik, right? So some of them are public, like we used to like go back and forth a lot back in the day in like 2016, 2017. So I'll tell this story in terms of the 3 big disagreements and where we are landing in the landscape. So I think the first of all, for a little background, Vitalik's a super intelligent person. And then Vitalik started off by building on Bitcoin. Right? Like he was trying to do certain things on Bitcoin and had a different idea that you're gonna go off, start a different system. Ethereum has been successful. But there's a fundamental disagreement between the 2 schools of thoughts, right? One school of thought, which I belong in, is that you start with money. You start with something that is very simple, very durable. You try to build money, and then you build an economy around it, or an app ecosystem around it, right? The second school of thought, which Vitalik belongs to, is you start off with the app platform, which is Ethereum, and once applications start using things, money emerges from it. So if you have seen, memes like ETH is ultrasound money and all of those things, that's coming from that school of thought. Whenever you look at Bitcoin, that hey, it's a 21 million hard cap asset, it's simple, it's durable, it's never going to change. There are a set of principles. We belong in a different school of thought, and I believe that this school of thought is winning. Bitcoin is internet money. Yes, some people would say it's not getting used in trading activity. You can't swap it for stablecoins easily. You can't use it on NFTs, and Ethereum is the thing that people are actually using online. My response is for now, right? But it's lacking the basic fundamental properties that you need in internet money. Bitcoin has that. It gets all of those check marks. And the last step is the infrastructure around Bitcoin, the L2s and other dev tooling that would enable people to just start using BTC everywhere. And I think we are getting closer and closer to that. So I wouldn't say that over here in this disagreement that Bitcoin is clearly winning or has already won, but I think we are getting there, right? More people think of Bitcoin as money. Like I have unhealthy levels of exposure to Bitcoin. Most of my savings are in Bitcoin because I think of that as a savings technology. I don't think of Ethereum as savings technology. If I own any ETH, it's mostly to pay gas fees for stablecoins. And once stablecoins are running on Bitcoin and I can pay the gas fees in BTC, I'll be paying gas fees in BTC, right? So that's number one. And I think it's important to ask yourself, like, where do you land? Do you truly believe Bitcoin is going to be internet money? That's going to be the asset that everyone sort of like trusts, and it's the neutral thing the world uses? If you do, then you're in the camp of like building on Bitcoin versus going somewhere else. And I think that's a huge opportunity, right? Like if you think about just the state of things today, Bitcoin is north of $1 trillion asset, and barely 1% of Bitcoin is deployed in any practical way. And that's not the case with Ethereum. Like I think maybe close to 35% of Ethereum is actually deployed is earning yields or is actively part of smart contracts. This is a massive opportunity. This is something that I've personally been going around the world over the last 2 years or so, when Bitcoin L2s are becoming a thing now, but we have to remember, even a couple of years ago, it wasn't the case. Like, we had to go out and actually educate people that this is a massive opportunity. The best form of internet money is mostly sitting passively, and developers can come and actually start using that. And once you do, I think there are network effects. Once Bitcoin becomes programmable through L2s and the dev tooling emerges, there are network effects there, because then everybody wants to plug into the largest economy. And I think Bitcoin is sort of like destined to be that largest economy. So the next thing, this is like going back to like 2016 and back and forth with me and Vitalik. There was a fundamental disagreement about how blockchains can scale. If people remember, there was a very large effort happening in Ethereum called sharding. I think they have slowly, silently moved away from it, even without giving much explanation. And at that time, the argument would be that Vitalik would say, we're going to do sharding and we're going to scale Ethereum and it's going to be fine. And my response would be, it's never going to work. You can't scale L1s that way. Eventually, all roads sort of like lead to L2s, right? This is why we started Stacks in 2017, around when Lightning started. This is what we believed in, that all roads sort of like lead to L2s, because you just do the basic calculations. If going to like even hundreds of millions of users, forget like a billion user, these people can't even own a UTXO on chain. Yes, there are some proposals about, hey, you can share UTXOs and whatnot, but it's almost impractical to reach a billion users on Bitcoin L1. So Bitcoin L2s are not a nice to have. They're not something that, hey, if you work on this, it'll be great. They are a necessity. They are a critical component in getting Bitcoin to a billion plus users to internet scale. Like, in terms of like, what Satoshi wanted to do, again, going back to the idea, it's not just starting Bitcoin, it's about growing Bitcoin and actually making it what it can be. And Bitcoin L2s are sort of like the only way. And that's why I feel like this is the most important project in my life that I could be working on. Because if Bitcoin is going to become what it's going to become, this is the thing that's actually going to enable it. And I think that's why we work on L2s. And if you go and do a check on Ethereum, they've completely done a U-turn, right? They have stopped working on sharding. They've dropped it from their R&D roadmap. And it's basically now everything in Ethereum is about L2s, is about rollups, and they have a rollup-centric roadmap now. That was the second disagreement. On that, I would say we have clearly won. L2s are the way to go, and I think now other people sort of like agree with it. So in terms of sort of like what's happening on the Bitcoin landscape, a lot of people, like, especially like a year and a half ago, you'll go around, try to tell people the same thing that I've told here, like $1 trillion asset, L2s are the only way to scale it, and this is the work that we're doing. And everyone would be like, hey, why aren't we seeing a lot of L2s then? What's stopping developers from coming here? There were a lot of skeptics. People were like, no, most of the innovation and development is happening on Ethereum or other places. No one wants to build on Bitcoin because you just can't build on Bitcoin, right? And the state of the art was there are two large L2s are like Lightning and Stacks. Rootstock has been around, and then there's Liquid, like the big four sort of. And I feel like over here, it's not a technology argument really, and this is something that I spend a lot of time explaining to people, that it's not that technology is really a limitation. It's more like culture and history. So I'm not blaming the maxis, but I'm kind of blaming the maxis over here, right? Like when 2017 happened and there was a Bitcoin civil war, a lot of the developers were actually pushed out of these communities. Like, there's a reason that we are having this dev event here, and this is not the main stage at the Bitcoin conference even today, even though these are the most important technological advancements that are happening in Bitcoin. So I think there was a little bit of a dark ages that we went through, which are gladly over now. And I think capital is flowing back in, developers are coming back in, and now there are like tons of other Bitcoin L2s launching, and we need to be friendly and welcoming to all of them, right? This is a free and open market. People will come with all of their different ideas, and they will build, and we will basically grow the entire market. So the Bitcoin L2 landscape is now very different from what it used to look like 2 years ago. So how do these things differ, right? There are three things. One is bridge security. How are you moving Bitcoin from L1 to L2? you've seen stuff around, ZK verification or things like BitVM and other approaches. Eventually, like in a couple of years, I think we'll get to a place where you will have a fully trustless bridge. So you can withdraw your assets without trusting any parties. Until then, I think we'll have some sort of trust minimized approaches like SBDC from Stacks. They're very practical, very pragmatic, and I think they give you a lot of the security properties. So that's the approach sort of like we take, and then different L2s have different models from federated all the way to trying to use BitVM and so on. The second thing is consensus. Like different L2s have different ways of doing consensus. Stacks is focused on really fast transactions that settle on Bitcoin. And the idea there is that we will get Bitcoin finality, but we really need to focus on UX. People need to be able to do Bitcoin payments, deploy their BTC in a fast, cheap way, and that's sort of like how we stand out. And the third thing is the programming languages, right? And that's the third disagreement with Vitalik, which I think is going to play out over the next couple of years, which is fundamentally about the programming languages that you use, right? So I'm in the camp that these programming languages have to optimize for just one thing, which is safety. But we have never kept money on computer programs before, right? So it's not about speed, it's not about ease of programming, it's not about anything else, it's about safety. And the language that we use, Clarity, and we might open up to other syntaxes as well, like Rust-like systems and so on, but they're focused on just one thing, and that is safety, and it's not a Turing-complete language. There are many L2s that are doing EVM, which is great. Again, let the market sort of like do its magic, and there are certain developers who might feel more comfortable doing EVM stuff, and it's great that they would have those options. But as far as Stacks is concerned, we are sort of like creating our own segment that people who want to come and they want to program with very safe languages. The syntax currently looks like Clarity, but it might look like Rust in the future. And I think that's the demographic that we are going after, and we feel very confident about that choice because it attracts a lot of senior, high-quality developers to sort of like come in and build there. So those were the three disagreements. First is about, do you start with money or do you start with an application platform? And we are saying we start with money. Second is, how do you scale this out? It's L2s, and that's, I think, is already happening on both sides. Both Ethereum and Bitcoin are now effectively in a race towards the L2s. And the third thing is, how are developers going to program these things? And we are standing in the no Turing-complete languages. We think safety is more important than being expressive. So with that, I'll sort of like give you a little bit of a preview of the ongoing work. So Stacks mainnet launched in early 2021. It was a very interesting thing that in the Genesis block of Stacks, there's a quote from Satoshi that talks about how you can build these other networks that share the CPU power of Bitcoin. And that code is from like 2010, and I thought that was very interesting that we are launching L2s and embedding the original code from Satoshi that sort of like predicted Bitcoin L2s back in the day, and we're coming back full circle. So in the last couple of years, the lessons that we learned of running a very large production system are that UX matters a lot. Bitcoin 10 to 40 minutes block times are too slow for DeFi and most of these use cases. So we're focusing a lot on UX, on speed. We want to reuse. It's not just $1 trillion in capital. It's also the hash rate of Bitcoin, the amount of security behind that hash rate. And we can not only reuse the Bitcoin capital, but we can also reuse Bitcoin security. And after Stacks Nakamoto, as soon as one Bitcoin block comes, Stacks starts following Bitcoin finality. You will have to go and attack Bitcoin and reorg Bitcoin to be able to reverse a transaction on the L2. And I think that's a really great property to have. And all of the focus is on moving BTC from L1 to L2 and making it as easy and as programmable for developers to work with. So that's sort of like the Nakamoto upgrade that's in the pipeline. I think the next 2 months are going to be extremely, extremely exciting. This is a project that's built by developers for developers. There's an extremely organic developer community. I think the way the project started with the SEC qualified offering also means that there aren't like large treasuries. It's not like there are a lot of incentives available. Even when going through a bear market, the developers are organic, and they are here because they're mission driven. They're here because they believe in something. They're here because they believe in Bitcoin. And I think that's always a great thing to have, because otherwise, if you just throw incentives at something, those things like sort of like disappear because people's heart is not in it, right? They're not mission-driven. They aren't doing things for the right reasons. And I think with this ecosystem, it's a very decentralized ecosystem. There are multiple entities, multiple new startups, multiple players coming in. And I think that's also a nod to the decentralization of Bitcoin itself. So if you're going to build L2s, I think Stacks is a thriving, exciting ecosystem. And we're very welcoming to all the other players as well, right? Like, we want more innovation. We want to expand the pie. I think the Bitcoin L2s are something like 4 or 5 billion market right now. We are probably 3.5 billion out of it, but it's nothing. I think ETH L2s are something like 80 billion today. And I think Bitcoin can actually be much, much bigger, especially when this message can actually go out to a much bigger audience. Like, imagine, look at the room. This room size is still very small. And imagine how critical a problem we're all working on. We're actually carrying forward the original sort of like mission of Bitcoin. We are the people who are going to make it possible that Bitcoin actually reaches 1 billion people. And I can't think of like a more important thing and more exciting thing to work on. Thank you so much.